Welcome back to Ralph Pinson's podcast, where ancient wisdom meets modern man. Today's episode was sponsored by Yaakov ben Rivka in honor of his mother's 5th yahrzeit. Today's episode is the 26th in our Q&A series.
There's a lot of major chiddushim that arose in Chassidus from the Baal Shem Tov. For example, a person should always be joyful. There's divine providence in everything. Every action that a person does, however mundane, should be linked to divine purpose. What's in the Chiddush of Tavach? How does it all come together?
What unites these ideas? So let's say there are 5. I'm going to say 5. I mean, there's so much more, but the 5 big things that are known about what the Baal Shem Tov came, what Chassidus came and taught the world, and changed things in a way. Most dominantly, I would say, is the idea of simcha, of joy. That simcha, the way joy was understood up until that time period, was that joy was, and this is what the Rishonim, it's written in the Rishonim already, in the early commentators, that joy is what completes a mitzvah. There's the mitzvah itself, there's the action itself, you're doing the mitzvah, and joy enhances the mitzvah and completes it in a correct way. So for example, when the Torah says, that the reason for all the rebuke and all these punishment, quote unquote, the toicha is because you didn't serve Hashem with joy. So the Rambam and the Arizal brings us down is that because you didn't experience the joy of a mitzvah. That when we did a mitzvah, we did a positive action, we did it as a burden. We didn't do it with joy. But joy was always considered as a part of another thing. So it was the shleimus, it was the completion of a mitzvah itself. One of the major things that the Baal Shem Tov revealed, and the Chassidus revealed to this world, was the idea of simcha, not simcha shel mitzvah, not the joy of a mitzvah, which was already before, but that simcha itself is a mitzvah. That to be joyful itself is a mitzvah. Ivdos Hashem b'simcha, that a person should serve Hashem with joy, and since a person is serving Hashem at all times, which is really what a person should be doing at all times. So since a person is always serving God, always in a posture of service to his man, to his fellow, to Hashem, so therefore a person should do that with joy. This is a very dominant feature. In fact, a lot of times in reference to Chassidim, to the early Chassidic students of the schools of the Baal Shem and his students, they're referred to as the joyous ones, the Freilacha. And some of the condemnation or the criticism of Chassidus was that they're too joyful, almost. That they're dancing in the street or they're making somersaults or whatever. That was some of the criticism. But that was a very dominant feature of what it means to be a joyful person, to always be with joy, with a certain sense of happiness. Not to be kalamutna, not to be depressed or melancholy. Another major feature, another major teaching of the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov was the idea of hashgacha pratis, the idea of divine providence. Now, in the early Rishonim, in the early commentators who speak about this idea, like for example in the Rambam, in the Guide to the Perplexed, the Mar Nevuchim, the Rambam says that there's something that's called, and also many Rishonim write this, that there's something that's called hashgacha pratis, divine specific intention, providence, the orchestration in a very specific way, and then there's something that's hashgacha klalis, the general overarching theme. So let's say, for example, let's say a person says, let's say a person's a mayor of a town, right? And says, I want the town to function. It should be a civilized town. People should listen to the police, and everyone should do the right thing, and it should be ethical and moral, etc. That's general. But I don't really care, and I want it to be clean, let's say. But I don't care, exactly at this corner, you should have flowers or grass. Whatever it is, what you decide. The general overarching feeling of this town should be one of civility and order and beauty. Okay. That's called hashgacha prat klalis. There's a general overarching idea, and then you could say also in terms of what's the objective. The world has to get to a certain direction, to a certain place, and how it gets there is not so relevant. But there's a certain objective divine desire for the world to manifest itself in its correct form, in its whole form, in a messianic state, in a redemptive state. Okay, generally, the world has to work to that direction. That's hashgacha klalis, which is general. And then, with regards to human consciousness, hashgacha pratis, which means specific divine intention, refers to only a person who lives very intentionally. So it's like a sliding scale. The more a person lives in dialogue with his creator or creator, the more a person lives with intentionality and mindfulness in their own lives, the more they receive divine specific intention, hashgacha pratis. So if a person's just living his life, just, living, like just going through life, eating, sleeping, procreating, enjoying themselves, whatever, not a terrible life. And the person's like a moral person, but not doing anything specific, wonderfully specific, just, going through life, almost like, I wouldn't say like an animal, but not something wrong with an animal, just grazing through life. This person doesn't have hashgacha pratis, doesn't have divine providence on his life. A person lives with more attention, and the amount of attention a person lives, that's how much a person has hashgacha, divine providence. Comes along the Baal Shem and says that no, it's not only that he's saying that it's no, but it's important to understand that the Baal Shem allowed for the revelation of this idea to be revealed in this world, that it wasn't an argument that the earlier is said this way, and now the Baal Shem revealed this in this world, which means at this point there's a new type of revelation in this world. And this type of revelation revealed that every single thing had hashgacha pratis, right? That every single thing had a divine providence. Not only humans, but every single thing that happens in this world has divine providence. So there's a new revelation in the world. There was a new spiritual quality in the world that was not revealed previously. It's not only that he revealed something that they didn't know. It's not just a knowledge-based thing. Previously they didn't know about it, like the Rambam didn't think about it, and the Baal Shem Tov thought about it. No. When the time of the Baal Shem, time of the time of the Rambam, this revelation was not present, and it was not a reality yet, and we'll see why. So that's another big theme. Another big theme of the teachings of Baal Shem, like you mentioned, is the idea of b'chol dechachadeu, which means in every single action, every single thing that a person does, they should know Hashem. Do'ehu dahu, you should know Hashem. The Gemara says brachas. The Talmud says that it's a very important verse. That a lot of Torah is connected to this verse, but to make it an essential verse, that in contrast to the idea of Chol Masach Yil L'Shem Shamayim, which is every single action you do should be for the intention of heaven, but B'chol Derech and every action should be the intention to do it, is very different. The Megal HaMukas actually says it, but the Baal Shem Tov reveals this much more clearly, is that there's two different ways to think about this. One is that Chol Masach Yil L'Shem Shamayim, every single action you do should be for the purpose of heaven, which means you're eating, so you should have strength. The eating itself is nothing inherently positive or holy. The eating, it's a means. I eat so I can be strong enough so I can pray and I can learn. I give charity. Okay, so it's l'shem shamayim. It's for the purpose of heaven. B'chol derech means that the eating itself is a sacred act. That and this is a very strong teaching of the Baal Shem, that every single action a person does, they have a possibility of da, which is unity, yichud, with who? With Hashem. And it's so much so that from that perspective, not only every single action a person does is important, but whether a person is a scholar sitting and learning Torah, which obviously Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, which is a very high level of living, sitting and learning, or a person davening, or a person is being a shoemaker. That the shoemaker stitching the shoes is doing a holy work just as holy, for a different purpose, just as holy as the person that's sitting and learning. It's not one is doing something higher, one is doing something lower. There's no higher and lower. If a person is doing b'chol derech de'eu in every single action, it can be either through learning or even through doing work. There's a story of a certain chassid that came to a Rebbe, and the Rebbe was very impressed with this chassid, this disciple, and told him, and he was a businessman and was also a great scholar. He said, you should drop your business and you should become a rabbi because you're a great scholar. And then he went back to his Rebbe, which is the Mordechai Lechitz. And he came to his Rebbe, and his Rebbe was very upset. He said that other Rebbe that told you should go work, you should go sit and learn, you should drop your work, obviously doesn't understand about souls. Because your soul is really meant to work. Which means your tikkun in this world is not to sit and learn the whole day. Obviously you have to kaveh Torah, of course, you have to sit and learn, every person has to learn Torah. But your main focus, which means the at least in kamos and quantity of time, is that you should be doing work, because that's your tachlis. Your tachlis is that your neshama came down this world. The reason why your soul came down this world is to do work. That's a very, very strong thing, and there was a lot of pushback about this on the teachings of the Baal Shem. Unfortunately, it was it almost disappeared for many years. For the third generation, it almost disappeared. This type. You find it later, but the Sas Emes brings it back a little bit, and the Rebbe definitely, the Baal Shem brought it back in a strong way, because that's the shleimus of Teres Chassidus. But that's another conversation, because that's the completion of the teachings of Chassidus. But the idea of that every single action should be done. Another important thing, I'm just giving you 5 examples, then we'll try to unify these ideas, is that there's a language that's brought down in Tanya, a very famous language, that says that there's a soul that's called a chelik elakal mimal mamash, a divine part of the divine itself, literally, mamash. Now, that exact phrase, chelik elakal mimal, is a pasuk, is a verse. Even the word mamash, which is say dugris, real, this is really a fact, is not the Alter Rebbe's word. It's already mentioned earlier by Mukabalim, early Mukabalim, Shafatal, and others already mentioned earlier. The chiddush with Alter Rebbe, what's the great novelty of Chassidus is, Alter Rebbe is really writing something that's also written in the Priyahars and Parshas Yeshiv, which means he's writing something with his Rebbe that he heard from the Baal Shem. This is the Torah of Chassidus. That originally, when they said Nefesh Hashem is called Chelik Elakal Mamash, or Chelik Elakal Mimal Mamash, that phrase, they referring to tzaddikim. That a tzaddik, a righteous person, is a person that has a Chelik Elakal Mimal Mamash, a little part of the divine in them. Yeah, but so, in other words, it goes back to the idea of the Hashgacha. It's a sliding scale. When a person lives on a very high level spiritually, that a person is actually a tzaddik, such a refined person, this person is given a chelik, elika, bimal, mamash, a little part of the divine. The soul is not something that desires to be connected to the divine, not something that wants to be connected, that looks to be connected, but the soul is actually a part of the divine. Part and divine actually is a contradiction in terms, because you can't be a part of the whole, but that's another conversation. So what was the chiddush? The chiddush was, the novelty of the idea was that every single yid has a chelik, elika, bimal, mamash. That's the chiddush. This is the fourth idea. The fifth idea, which was besides the democratization of spirituality, which means that it was relevant to everybody. One of the fascinating things that happened with Chassidus is that the conversation also moved to women. Now, it doesn't sound like such a big idea, but that's because we're living in the 21st century, for better. But that's, I would say, for better, of course. But that the idea is that Chassidus came and said that the teachings of Chassidus, the light of Chassidus, the oil of Chassidus, is relevant to all people, to all men and women, and even children. In fact, the Rebbe Rayatz, the Rebbe Yosef Yitzchak, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, when he was in Poland, I even worked a little bit with the Piasetzner Rebbe to start chaburas of people to get together, Bachram, with boys to get together to learn Chassidus, and girls with girls to learn. They had starting chaburas to people to learn Chassidus. If to learn Gemara was a question, and it was debated, but Chassidus was applicable to everybody. Because there was a spirituality that was that accessible, and the learning about the Achdus Hashem, the oneness of Hashem, which was applicable to everybody. In fact, it was applicable to all people, right? Because that's the oneness of Hashem. What's the nakuda? What's the essence of all these teachings? The essence of all these teachings is that it's the light of Moshiach. It's the arose of Moshiach. When there's a revealing of the arose of Moshiach, the arose of Moshiach, the difference between exile and exiled state and a redemptive state is that exile is process. Redemption is already presence. When you're moving towards something, what does exile say? Exile says It's not now, it's not you, and it's not here. What does redemption say? The redemptive state, the redemptive paradigm of redemptive, that it's here now you, right? That's exactly. It's right now. So when there was revealing of the oil of Moshiach, the redemptive state, the oil of Yechida, the oil of the light of the redemptive reality of Geula that was revealed in the teachings of the Chassidus, what that meant was then that simcha, joy, is not just when we're doing a spiritual act, but by doing every act, because every act is a tachlis, an end in itself. And therefore, hashgacha pratis is divine providence is not only for a specific person, but it's every single person. Because the hashgacha clause means that it's only a process to get to an end, because I don't have intention in the specifics. It's not about the specifics, it's about the overarching thing that's going to unfold. Hashgacha says no, that every single thing is an end in itself. So therefore there's divine providence in everything. The same thing goes with Chachadeu, and everything you should know. Everything you should know means that it's not just process-based, which means I'm eating so I should have strength to eventually I should learn. But right now, because it's about presence. And the same thing goes to Chelik Mal, that every person has a Chelik Elokah, a divine soul, not just the tzaddik, but every single individual person. The same thing also the idea with women, that it's relevant to every single person. And specifically also with women, because women, in contrast to men, but that's a long conversation, is that women represents presence and men represent process. That's why L'asad Lavai, in the future it says, there's a messianic vision that says, Nekevet to Soiv Gavar, that the feminine will transcend or encircle the male, because in the world that we're living, which is, or the structure of exile, is a masculine structure. Because it's a masculine structure, it's always about process oriented. It's about getting somewhere. We're not here yet, and we're going to move towards someone. It's goal-oriented. It's process-oriented. The idea of women, and that's why you say because the women we will redeem, and because the women will be redeemed in the future, because the women is the concept of women and feminine quality is the idea of presence, of revealing of the presence. So all of these teachings of the Baal Shem Tov is really, if you reduce them to all, and you can find it with many other teachings. But this is a sample of these ideas, of some of the big ideas of the teachings of Chassidus. That all the big ideas is basically saying when there's a revealing of the end within the means. When the tachlis is revealed already now, a glimmer of the tachlis is revealed already now, so then it's every single person right now, right here, in this place. And that's the oyer of the teaching of Chassidus, of that light. And therefore we have to connect it with every single thing we do, in every single moment that we are, to connect to that redemptive or that redemptive light.
Thank you for listening to Rav Pinson's podcast. To submit questions or to sponsor a future episode, please email ravpinsonpodcast@gmail.com. The link is in the description below.